All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Children of the Watch. Now, Children of the Watch is a separate show than Mando, which Willie and I are doing, and Children of the Watch is going to be a panel discussion show primarily geared toward The Mandalorian as it's running, but covering all manner of Star Wars throughout the year. Tonight, Willie and I are joined by videographer, friend, filmmaker, and avid Star Wars fan, John Fioravanti, who is joining us on our inaugural episode because John took particular umbrage to something I said, Willie, in our last episode covering Chapter 11, The Heiress, in which I said that with the name dropping of Ahsoka, the show was going to fundamentally change when Ahsoka was introduced because adding Jedi in is a cork that you can't put back in the bottle. And I thought that John had an interesting take on that. So, John, please tell me how wrong I am.
So wrong, Brian. So wrong. So basically, my point was just that we've had the aspect of Jedi in the show since day one. Yes, we didn't quite see anything specific in the first episode, but episode 2, just literally halfway through the episode, we get a very intense Force moment where he picks up this massive creature, and it's viewed as this grandiose thing, this legendary power, but he doesn't even know what it is. He has no idea what he's looking at. And just that glorification of this mystic art form that isn't as well known anymore because obviously it's faded away. But also that still applies. That's still a valid, even if it's not specifically Jedi, it's a Force sensitive trait. And the fact that especially the fact that it's Baby Yoda. I mean, yes, it's the child. I hate calling it Baby Yoda. That's the general consensus. I get it, but it's the child to me. But it is. It's the elephant in the room. That's Yoda or a part of the species, and it's one of the most powerful Jedi to ever exist, arguably. Which I said that in the text, arguably, because there's a lot of other points I could make there, but yeah, it's just that huge thing that is just Jedi, this thing that hangs over all our heads, oh, Star Wars Jedi, it's synonymous.
Sure.
Yes and no. This show doesn't need to be that, but it's there, and we're at this point in the timeline that I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but Luke just took down the Empire, and nobody's even mentioned his name yet. No
Sure.
one said anything about Skywalker. No one said anything about Leia. No one said anything about Han, about any of the main characters, which is great. I don't want them to go immediately into that.
Yeah.
That story's been beaten to death. We're
Yes.
good. But that isn't to say that I don't think that they might end up going there in the future. Just because they already got there with Baby Yoda. They're going there again with Ahsoka, and I'm pretty sure there's going to be some Ezra situations or something similar in the future.
I think Ezra would be very cool, and Willie and I have talked about on my Shark Watch that the third Shark for the show to completely jump the shark is a main tier legacy character. But Willie, as a huge Ahsoka fan, because I'm of the opinion that adding Jedi in, even Ahsoka, fundamentally changes and ruin is a strong word, but I think diminishes the show's value. Willie, as an Ahsoka stan, how do you feel about that?
Total stan. I think there's a couple different things I wanna pick at here. First, I do think there's a difference between having Baby Yoda, who's coming into his Force powers, and having a full Jedi, and even more so to the fact that, and I'm beginning to feel like they've really done this on purpose. There have been several moments where I thought Baby Yoda was going to use the Force this season and hasn't yet. So I feel like they're definitely saving that for something big. The other thing I do want to mention is that, you know, especially in this point in Ahsoka's timeline, I mean, she spends a lot of time not considering herself a Jedi, and also closed off from the Force. So I do think it's possible to introduce Ahsoka without introducing a Jedi who's going to be using Force powers all the time.
That would be interesting, and maybe
sure.
we don't see her purified crystal lightsabers. We just see her with the staff like we did at the end of Rebels. Now, that's something interesting. I think that, and here's my thing. I think if you start going full board Jedi, I think if Ahsoka's wielding lightsabers and fighting Moff Gideon with his dark saber, then the show is broken. However, I think if you are going to do it, because you obviously are, Willie and I, we talked about last week that adding Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka, you don't go out and you get that level of talent if you're just going to have someone as a cameo. So if she's gonna be in the show, which she obviously is,
Plus,
I think
got major ties to Mandalore. Sorry to cut you off.
Sure, no, yeah, she definitely does. She's part of the siege. Yeah, and I think the way to do it, the way I would want them to do it, to not break the show world, is to take a more New Hope approach, where in A New Hope, the Force was very foreign to almost everyone involved except for Obi-Wan Kenobi, and it was just this old guy kind of spewing nonsense that if you weren't aware of the larger story, he's just like, I don't know, this guy's crazy and I don't know what he's doing. Obi-Wan doesn't really use the Force ever except for a Jedi mind trick, and then when he's fighting Vader, I guess, if you're saying, you know, lightsabers, force wielding, and then he teaches Luke to make the shot. But other than that, the Force is very removed from A New Hope, other than, again, Obi-Wan being extemporaneous with his thoughts. So I think that's the way to go about this. If they find Ahsoka, they introduce the child, she realizes he's Force sensitive, and then there's some level of kinship there and training. I don't know if we dive into a full training. I think that starts to get murky. But if they take that kind of one step removed approach, I think that's the way to go.
You know, I mean, I think it depends too. I mean, we've kind of talked about this, but I think that I'm still not sure that the show has exactly solidified what it is about. And I think we're going to find out with how they introduce Ahsoka. I could see Mando dropping Baby Yoda with Ahsoka, and the two are never seen in the show again.
Yeah,
I could see that being completely possible. And then he just goes off.
With that.
It's interesting because I don't know if I don't think the show was ever supposed to be the Mando and Baby Yoda show. That's just what it's become. Because I think people responded so well to Baby Yoda. And, you know, now what did they do with that? Like, does he care? Like, does he start training Baby Yoda? Like, what do you do with that once you throw a Jedi in there?
I wonder if we're gonna have like a dog moment where like Baby Yoda has to choose between Ahsoka and Mando. Like they put him in the middle of the room, and like he doesn't want to go, or like a moment where he's trying to, send the child off to learn with Ahsoka and learn with the Jedi, or whatever species Yoda is, and the child doesn't want to go. So
that's the most accurate.
Yeah.
Prediction is that there's going to be a moment where he's like, okay, I've completed my mission, like you're with the people you need to be with now, and the child's just not going to go. He's just not going to want to, because that's his dad, that's his archetype now. Like he wants to be with Din, and like not obviously, like he does what he wants to do. We've seen that all season this year, except for when he finally learns some compassion and like sees that what he was eating was children and not food. But like there's like a morality thing there that, like, even hearkening back to season 1 when they're doing the arm wrestling scene. I love that scene so much, when they're doing the arm wrestling scene and he starts choking Cara Dune. Is like, that's that hair trigger that separates the dark and the light which is great to me. And I think bringing Ahsoka in is, and I hate to be, extra here, but like that gray area that nobody wants to talk about in the canon yet. And like, I'm really hoping that they really pull through, because at the end of Clone Wars, obviously that new final season, they addressed it briefly. There was like that unspoken brief moment of like, she's not really a Jedi anymore. This is what she's become, and like that balance. And I really hope that they address that in a live action show, because I've wanted that in canon since I was a kid.
They've definitely been building that for years,
Yeah.
Trying to do something with that. I think, John, what you said to me would actually be the most interesting thing, and I think this would address your concern as well, Brian, is if they bring Ahsoka in, and let's say Mando, Yoda, and Ahsoka adventure for a couple episodes, and then in the finale, Baby Yoda has to choose, and he chooses to stay with Mando. I think that's interesting because he's choosing a path away from the Jedi, but he's doing that by choosing against Ahsoka, who also chose a path against the Jedi. So it's kind of like that is very thematically interesting to me. But I also think it sets up, obviously one of the questions that they kind of have to deal with is where was Baby Yoda during Force Awakens, blah, so on and so forth. And maybe he doesn't train under Ahsoka. Maybe he chooses not to go down that path and becomes, not necessarily a Mandalorian per se, but just a rogue bounty hunter.
I'm really interested in the idea to that point is the child going to go dark? Is the child going to dabble into the dark side? Because every time Mando is murdering someone or tricking someone or lying or doing something just that Mando would do, they always do a cutaway to Baby Yoda, and he's like, looks inquisitive, or like, what's that? Or like, John, to your point, when he force chokes Cara Dune, which force choking, despite Luke using it, when Luke is all dark side in Return of the Jedi at Jabba's palace, force choking is a dark side element. I mean, I think the new Disney canon has stripped away that there are certain powers available to both sides and just kind of made it one ethereal thing. However, I think that's more of a dark side thing. My concern with that is, I think that's the most interesting thing, is that the child stays with Mando and then dabbles in the dark side, and we either have Ahsoka in to help him deal with that if she is more of the middle ground, or she is out and then she'll need to come back in, or he'll need to be redeemed of some kind. I just think that the dark side in the child is interesting. My two concerns with that are, one, if we get dark the child, is it going to be like a Gremlins vibe? Like, is it just going to, like, that image is very, like, I'm seeing that. And two,
before you go down this rabbit hole, consider what we're talking about here. This is a Disney property.
Yeah.
This is, at the end of the day, it's a Disney property. They're not gonna go that dark with it, especially Favreau. Like, he'll definitely pull he's not gonna pull too many punches, but like, when at the end of the day, the outcome is going to be overwhelmingly positive, like cathartic at the end of at the very end of everything. They might go on some crazy roller coaster, but the timeline is what's interesting to me, because they said in the beginning he's 50 years old. He's still a baby, but he's coherent enough to understand what's going on most of the time. Like that scene in the first episode where he's like, shit's about to go down. I'm going to press the button on my carrier and close it to, before things hit the fan. And that's awareness. Like, he's aware of what they're talking about. He's aware of what's going on. He can read the room. He's not just a baby, really, at the end of the day. He's still a kid, but he's not really a baby anymore. Like, people don't pick that up because of how small he is, because of how kind of infantile he is. But like, mentally, he's still 50 years old. So the gap there is, how do they progress his storyline when his lifespan is so incredibly long that, like, by the time he's even a viable character, Mando's going to be dead. So like, that's my question. My biggest question of the show is, if they keep Baby Yoda in the show, how are they going to progress that character at all?
I mean, we could have a Guardians of the Galaxy 2 situation where he's aged up enough to communicate, whether between season breaks or something like that. But I think that's a fair point. It's concerning because I think from Guardians of the Galaxy 2 to Avengers Infinity War, when Groot ages to like a teenager, and now we're like at a whole different thing. I don't want that. I don't want teenage Yoda, for sure. Like, and I don't think Disney would ever pull the trigger on their ultimate cash cow marketing of the child, but I think they could do a little bit of an age up and have him start speaking. But I also don't know if I personally want that, because then is it going to be Yoda's dialect? Like, is he going to speak backwards? And like, are we going to do that whole thing? But I think to go back to the larger issue of adding in the Jedi ruining the show, and the dark side, going back to what I was saying, and John, you saying that Disney would never pull that trigger, I think that there's some precedent. So there's an episode in the Clone Wars where Yoda comes face to face with his own dark side and is literally dealing with it, and it's it's a great episode.
Not any Star Wars thing ever.
I think we could see elements of that, and I think again, if they're treading that line of the Force of its again, going back to Obi-Wan, its components. What is the Force? The Force binds us all. It's an energy field. Instead of having Ahsoka be the traditional, like, I'm the master, you're the apprentice, here are my lightsabers, here are lightsaber fights. I think that's when I really get worried about the show having longevity, is if they go that route. If they take the more balanced approach, I think that they'll be okay.
I think the one thing too is I was definitely, they did this with Rebels as well, where, they kind of keep Jedi for the most part. I mean, Ezra isn't really a Jedi until the end of the first season. So they kind of keep that out of season 1, as well as keeping most of the larger Star Wars universe at bay until season 2. And then they really start bringing in, and then they do episodes with, Lando has an arc, then they bring in all these other people, and it works because they set up what Rebels itself was. They set up that core unit in season 1. So it wouldn't surprise me if they try to do some of a template here too, where it's like, okay, we've had one season of The Mandalorian, and now we're going to slowly introduce stuff. However, like I said, I'm just not sure that. I think Rebels at the end of season 1 was much more. I mean, obviously it had 20 some odd episodes. Was obviously much more defined as a show than Mando was. Just after 8. But I do think that they were able to address the concerns of bringing a Jedi and bringing the Force into it without ruining Rebels.
It's a fair point, and Rebels did really handle it well. I guess a new thought here is that, like, okay, Willie, you're obviously on the Ahsoka train. I think what Disney is going to do is go the route I'm afraid of and have her wield her, whether they are the white lightsaber, the clear lightsabers, with the purified crystals. So we're gonna add that in. I'm gonna right now go down this path and say we're adding those in. Who does she fight? Because Disney's not gonna have her not do anything. So she's gonna have to have action. She's gonna use the lightsabers. So who is she fighting? Is she fighting Gideon, or is that Bo-Katan's fight? Or are we aiming towards a large team up in season 3 or 4 of the retaking of Mandalore with Ahsoka and Bo-Katan versus Gideon?
What other sabers are in play that she could combat against? If there's even sabers in play, the only other character,
the legacy sabers in play.
But that's Gideon. Oh no, the legacy saber.
I'm talking about Luke's that Maz Kanata has, or Anakin's, as it's more normally known. Before Disney decided that it was the main. Yeah,
there's another rabbit hole. There is, what if they address the fact that someone found Luke's saber?
So the comics are handling that right now. The comics
Oh,
have answered that question. Yeah, I'm not up to date on the comics, but I know they've answered that question. There are other sabers. So part of what Luke has been doing during this time specifically is he's kind of being like a space Indiana Jones, and
Yep.
he is kind of finding Jedi artifacts. So there are sabers around. However, I'm just thinking, what does she fight? Is it going to be, because the First Order is a long way off, and I don't think you can add Sith in. So
I think we see her all season without fighting anybody.
that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
And I hope they do that. I'm just thinking marketing. I'm thinking Disney trying to push Ahsoka. I don't know that they can hold back on that. Like the poster for the new season of the Clone Wars is like Ahsoka with her new two blue lightsabers that Anakin made for her. I just don't. She's so iconic in her imagery with the two lightsabers. I just don't know if they can not pull that trigger. And again, then that's when I think the show becomes something else. I think the show is most successful when it's at its it's a space western that has some elements of the Mando and his identity as a father figure and who he is as a person, whether he is part of the Mandalorian creed or whatnot. So I don't know. Where are we at on this? Are we pro Jedi in their more prequel era form of lightsaber fights and all of that jazz, or are we pro the Force and Jedi as more concepts and ideas? John, give me your final thoughts on this.
I think that the fact that we are post return, it is going to be like it was in New Hope. I feel like they're going to treat it just like that. They're going to go by that book because it's a formula that worked, and Favreau is, at the end of the day, a diehard fan. So he's going to stick to that formula, I think, and we're going to see it as more of a legendary thing. And I think the only time we're actually going to see evidently Ahsoka's lightsabers is going to be like that one big oh crap moment where it's like we've been waiting for it for 3 episodes or something, and then it needs to happen. There's no other way to get past that point in the story, and she pulls them out. It's going to be a huge moment, and then they're going to, whatever climax is going to happen, and then that's really going to be probably it until we have the Mandalore fight, if she's even in it.
Willie?
I think that's the extent that we'll see.
I'm pro Ahsoka, but con Jedi. I do, because I think you can bring Ahsoka in without bringing the Force in, and I it just depends on how they do all of it.
Yeah, I am out on all of it. I'm just kidding. I'm pro Ahsoka overall. I'm more down on Ahsoka than most people are. In general, I think she's overused. However, I'm pro if they keep the Force as more of a concept than anything else. But I swear to God, if she whips out the lightsabers before the end of the season, I'm doing a whole episode where I tell you guys how wrong you were and how right I was. With that, we will sign off, and we'll be back with another Children of the Watch interstitially throughout the season, just getting back into more discussion about Star Wars because that's what we love. Willie, John, thank you for joining me this evening, and as always, Max Rebo, where was he? I don't know. Not in this conversation, but I had to bring him in somewhere. Remember, the Force will be with you always.